Support for Digging Deeper comes from the Penn State Alumni Association, connecting alumni to the university and to each other. The Alumni Association is powered by pride. Learn more at alumni.psu.edu. And from viewers like you, thank you.
Hi, I'm Elisa Vasquez. Universities have long been leaders in efforts to mitigate global climate change. They are hubs of research and provide an ideal environment to test new technologies. In May of 2018, Penn State launched the Energy 2100 initiative with the goal of using Penn State's activities in renewable energy to maximize the university's contributions towards creating a carbon-neutral global energy economy. On this episode of Digging Deeper, Penn State President Eric Barron talks to Bruce Logan, director of the Engineering, Energy, and Environmental Institute at Penn State, and Megan Hoskins, director of Operations and Partnerships at the Sustainability Institute at Penn State, about the Energy 2100 initiative and what Penn State is doing in the field of renewable energy.
So, welcome. Really interesting topic. Energy is incredibly important to this university, to society. Maybe we could just start with what exactly is renewable energy? What counts as a renewable energy source?
Well, anything that's sustainable. If you dig something up out of the ground, unless you put it back, that's not sustainable.
Yeah.
So it's anything that you can constantly renew or be renewed, like wind or solar, biomass.
So those are it, basically, that we're focused on?
There are additional, I'll just say biomass is only renewable if you use a sustainable source for the biomass.
Right.
But there's also hydroelectricity, so power from water, and wave energy would be a sustainable.
Some more
tidal energy, salinity gradients, concentration gradients, heat gradients, anything where there's a difference.
Anything you can take advantage of that would allow you to generate power, but it's still there when you're done.
Yep.
Okay, so now what's 2100, Energy 2100?
Well, 2100, when people look at what's happening with climate change, there's not a lot of agreement when glaciers are going to melt, or how much is going to melt. So people tend to use by 2050 or by 2100. And so 2100 is just saying by the end of this century, what are things going to look like? I mean, how we get there, how fast we can get there, that's one thing, but certainly by the end of this century, we have to have solved our energy needs, because if we haven't, the climate change consequences are enormous. It could be anything from, some people say, 1 or 2 feet of sea level rise. Professor at Penn State is saying more like 2 meters, and others.
It's a big number.
2 meters, 6, 7, 8 feet. Some people
Most
are saying
of Miami's underwater.
Miami, Boston Harbor, a lot of Manhattan.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's to say this is something we don't want to see happen. So by the end of the century, we have to have done at a reasonable pace the things that we need to do. And there's a sense of urgency.
You're looking at these greenhouse gases that are contributed by energy usage, and basically this objective is to hit this time period 80 years from now and to be carbon neutral, to be not putting CO2 into the atmosphere?
Hopefully we get there a lot sooner.
Yeah.
It's just to say that that's, the end game sort of for most everything, because by that point of, a child born today, 80 years from now, that's their generation.
A lot of people would say this is a long time to wait.
Yeah. Yeah, we can't wait that long. But we don't, again, relating it to the climate change scenario, we don't know when that sea level is going to rise. And so it's all based upon the fact that so many people live near the coast. They have to realize the sea's coming up, and they got to push the CO2 down in order to keep those seas from rising up.
So where did the idea of 2100 come from?
It was just a meeting, actually, at Penn State. We were talking about we needed to do more in renewable energy, and what are we going to do? And I said to Tom Richards, I said, by the time, by 2100, we need to have, this will all be over. We'll have figured it out. And that just start to think about that. As,
So this is internal Penn State attitude, from our viewpoint, help solve this problem. And does that mean we're focused on the university or we're focused on the globe as Penn State's contribution?
I think we're focused on the globe, but we lead by example, don't we?
Right. Makes a difference to lead by example.
Right.
So what types of things are we doing?
Well,
So Penn State has done quite a lot in energy over the last 10, 15 years. So we started paying attention to our greenhouse gas emissions back in the early 2000s, late 90s. And we've reduced that by 32% since 2005. We started with energy reductions. So one of the things that we can really focus on, everyone can focus on, is reducing how much energy we do use, paying attention to where the energy is being used and what we can cut back on. So we've done that a lot over the past 15 years. And then started doing renewable energy with a hydroelectric purchase in 2013. Now we've worked up to some solar purchases and have 2 more recent ones, one on campus towards the hospital, which is a 2 megawatt solar array. Now we have a solar power purchase agreement that's going into Franklin County, which is a 70 megawatt array, which will take up 25% of our Penn State's purchased electricity for the whole Commonwealth. And that one is being constructed as we speak.
We also had a transition from coal to natural gas.
That's true.
Is it a big factor in that equation of reducing greenhouse gas emissions?
It did bring our greenhouse gas emissions down quite a bit, yes.
and also the number of trucks coming in and out of campus.
Changed.
Well, because you had all those
In a
trucks
pipe.
hauling in coal, and,
Yeah.
and you know, and if they even looked at doing that with wood, but they would have like quadrupled the number of trucks they need to have coming through.
Do it,
and-
yeah.
But now the gas is piped in, and so it's cleaner. It's a lower CO2 footprint.
I was actually there for the last shovelful of coal.
Were you?
on Penn
Okay.
State campus, which was
Yeah.
an interesting phenomenon.
And I watched the coal tower come down, the smokestack.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was fun.
That's cool.
So let's take each one of those in turn. So first part of Penn State leading by example, reduce our energy usage. So what are the types of things that we've been doing to do that?
So one of the big things is looking at our buildings. So we have an energy savings program, which has been going on for 15 years. And that is basically a loan program. So when energy is reduced in a building, the savings that you get back from reducing your utility costs is used to pay back the loan. So that's a program that incentivizes 10-year paybacks.
Is this a lot of money that we're doing like this?
Yes. I think it's $100 million over the last...
$100 million of energy savings efforts, which we borrow the money and then use the savings to pay it back. Okay,
Yes.
fantastic.
So that's one of them. Continuous conditioning of buildings is another big one. So if you think about, you have an air conditioning unit, for example, in a building, and a fan or a louver gets stuck open. So it's always blowing air even when you don't need to. Fixing those little things can turn into big amounts of savings. So we have a continuous conditioning program here as well.
So this is the Office of Physical Plant taking all these actions.
Yes.
Does the behavior of employees make a difference in this equation?
It does definitely make a difference, yes. So the Sustainability Institute has some programs about having green teams in your office. So they can talk about how they can see energy savings or waste savings, things like that in your office, or water, things like that. There's also employee trainings that we can do.
Okay, so these are all the types of actions, and then the next step is deliberately looking at what the greenhouse gas emission is and changing what our energy source is.
Yes, so we've been tracking our greenhouse gases from the university, and we know where those emissions come from. So we did a lot to reduce energy. Energy is the biggest contributor to our emissions. So the natural gas switch was one of them. was one of the other reduction techniques. And then the the renewable power purchase agreements have been some other ones.
And then the next step, solar arrays.
Solar arrays, yes.
Yeah. And this is not just to solve an energy problem. We're actually having a lot of research being done in this area as well on how it is we integrate these energy sources. Is that true? Is Physical Plant actively engaged in university research as a partner?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm glad you asked. The Office of Physical Plant has been involved with our research at the university. They're very open to research potential. So for the 70 megawatt array, we actually had university researchers as part of the process of selecting the partners that we selected. And now that we have the partner, we're working with the Office of Physical Plant as well as other faculty to engage with research that could be done at the sites and with research that could be done around solar electricity. The one on campus is also being used because that one is more, it's tied into our grid for the university, and the relationship with that developer is also a good one as well, and they're working with
and the
researchers as well.
large array is actually us contributing energy into the grid for which we get credit no matter what source of energy it is. And then at the end of this, that's 25% of our energy in one fell swoop. So we're going to be majority renewable here.
Yeah, and it's nice we have a grid because you don't have to have those panels right next to the place that is using that electricity.
Yeah.
And so that makes it possible because we might not be able to put all those panels right next to
here.
University Park.
Yeah.
But we can put them where it gets into the grid, and therefore it's and that serves the whole community, right? It's not just.
It's huge.
Yeah. So.
Not only that, if it works really well, it's striking. One of the things that Governor Wolf said, and I echoed, was, this was the largest solar array in a public-private partnership in the state of Pennsylvania. And he said, and I agreed with him, that he hopes that record is broken right away.
Yeah.
Which means somebody else doing the same thing.
Well, and some people think the cost of solar is really expensive. The city of Los Angeles now is building, it's I think a 0.6 gigawatt solar array for the city of Los Angeles and battery backup. Now, natural gas is about 4 cents a kilowatt hour. The solar array is 2 cents a kilowatt hour, and the battery storage is about 1.6 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's actually half the cost of natural gas, which is, again, cheaper than coal.
Right.
People said when, people want to go to solar, we can't afford to do that. It's too expensive.
A decade ago.
Right. And
Even
now,
a decade ago, they said this is just too expensive. It's not cost effective.
And now we can't afford not to do this because it's too cheap.
Yeah, that's just sort of phenomenal that in that short period of time.
Right. So if anybody hasn't thought about this in the past 5 years, they're completely out of date in terms of what it costs, what it can deliver.
It's the technology that changed, right?
Yeah, manufacturing and technology.
And it produces an interesting case where you're seeing agricultural land go for a completely different purpose.
Right.
And now we can assess what happens to water quality, groundwater, and everything else. Are those results likely to be significant, that we're going to see it emerge as having many other byproducts?
Well, I think that's an interesting question because we're a land-grant institution.
Right.
We do all this stuff with agriculture, and yet we don't really know enough about what happens on, how to not just put solar panels or raise crops, but how do you do that together? Because there's a lot of crops that you can grow around solar panels. You don't have to give up the farm, so to speak, to convert it into solar panels. So it's much easier to imagine that with wind. Just have a big windmill up there.
Right, yeah.
But what do you do with, solar panels, and how do we integrate those? Because that would be much more efficient use of the land, But we haven't studied that nearly enough. And there are people at Penn State that very much want to do that.
And now we're going to be able to.
Well, I hope so.
They have a natural laboratory in order to do it. And you think they'll be able to write a research proposal and get a grant to do
I don't know. Are you ready to sign for that? No, I think that the spread of solar is now really on the land. It's the land scale solar that's really booming now. Yeah. And so people are going to want to know the answer to this. It's going to be different in Arizona than it is in Pennsylvania. Yep. Some people are putting solar panels on ponds. They cover the ponds up with essentially panels on floats, and they use that. It cuts down evaporation, and it generates solar energy. Oh. So there's a lot about that context of the energy.
We just don't know.
It's just grown so fast. Nobody knows. It's been doubling every 2 years.
So speaking of we just don't know, I'm sort of struck that here the motivation cost, well, that's something everybody can really grasp rather easily, and especially this notion, which is not what people expect, that solar could be less expensive. And this motivation about global warming and sea level rise and the impact and what the cost of that. But I'm struck that global warming is a argument that if you go out in the public, I believe it is awful, it isn't real. And if I look at some of the environmental impact characteristics, not climate change, about say, fracking and natural gas, it's the most horrible thing in the world. It's given us energy security.
Yeah.
So you come down to the point where you start to think that energy literacy is really at a very low point in this society. Yet this has to be one of the most profound and significant issues that society addresses, energy security. So is this what you see, and are you constantly being questioned about whether the facts are right there, or do you see a path towards energy literacy that makes this easier to do?
Well, you know, people always use analogies or they try and give some sort of symbolism that people can understand. So they'll say, oh, it's like a penny in an Olympic-sized swimming pool, or it's like an area the size of a football field.
Right.
How do you do that with energy?
Yeah.
I mean, a kilowatt hour, what does that mean to anybody? It doesn't, it has nothing tangible.
Right.
So I think the beginning of energy literacy is to give a sense of things, and, you know, 2,000 calories, cars with horsepower, kilowatt hours for your home, quadrillion BTUs, the energy for the U.S., these things, you know,
they're lost.
They're lost. They don't have a common basis.
Yep.
So, we have some ways that we'd like to do that. I don't know if you want to discuss that. But,
yeah, no, just give us a little snippet of.
Well, for most people, I say, okay, eat 2,000 calories a day. Everybody eats about 2,000 calories all around the world. If you were to power 100-watt light bulbs with that, how many could you power? Everybody thinks, and they go. I get answers like 3 or 4, 10, 20. I've gotten 100.
Yeah.
And the answer is 1. Uh-huh. And so think about all the food that you eat and what you can do with those 2,000 calories. And if you had 100-watt, the old 100-watt incandescent light, only one of those would be powered. Uh-huh. So now look at your whole life. Everybody in the U.S. together is about 100 100-watt light bulbs. In other words, I call that 100-watt light bulb one daily energy unit. Uh-huh. And so we all together consume about 100 of those. So you start to look at your house. That's about 13 of these. Or a gallon of gasoline is about 14. So you can see how things that you do in your life directly distill down to that sort of energy. And I think that's the kind of thing we need to build in. Yeah. How many solar panels? 0.43 D for a solar panel is, you know.
So this is a way to point out the magnitude. Where are the places to go that are, in a sense, the biggest consumers?
What is my home doing? What is my commute doing? What are, you know, leaving those lights on in my house doing? What is, and try and draw that down. And people say we need to get down to about 20. We're at 104. Switzerland is about 50. We need to get to about 20. So that's a goal. And how do we get there? How can we do that?
And so that literacy enters into weighing different types of fuels as well?
Different types of fuels. You know, how many, you know, if I have a solar panel, that's got to essentially zero D versus gasoline. If you commute and you burn a gallon of gasoline, that's 14D in a typical car. You do it in a Prius, it's like 4 or 5D. You do it in an electric car, it's about 2D, assuming it's coming from a solar panel. That's pretty good.
As opposed to something that you plugged in somewhere.
That's pretty good. So, you know, it's those decisions. And that's all built into sustainability. I mean, the energy is a part of the overall sustainability. So we can't do that, you know, and risk other things, but we have to.
So we're sitting here on the verge with all of this in our minds of a university that's going majority renewable. Big plans still continuing on where we're going? Are we going to see ourselves 100% renewable?
We certainly hope so, yeah. I mean, right now we're in the midst of our first large solar power purchase agreement off-site, so we're hoping that that goes well. But then next steps, yeah, let's do some more renewables.
So we're going to watch to see how this solar panel.
There's a lot in the works right now of, yes, community engagement, outreach. So let's educate people. Let's figure out how this goes.
Still part of this literacy effort.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so it seems like we've come a really long way in the last decade. I mean, a lot of transitions that we talked about, and for good purpose. 10 years from now, what will it look like? What will Penn State look like?
I hope we're close to, if not all, renewable energy.
And move that fast.
On our way there.
Yeah, it can move that fast. And do you think this demonstrates leadership
Yeah, you know,
to the rest of the world? If Penn State can do this in
absolutely.
short a period of time?
I think you're going to see our educational paradigm change. We're going to train people differently. And 10 years from now, we're going to be the example of renewable energy, and we're going to be seeing Pennsylvania follow that as well.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Appreciate the conversation.
It's great.
Thank you so much, President Barron, for speaking with us today.
My pleasure.
Renewable energy, which is something that Penn State has been a leader in. And you guys recently talked about how actually creating solar panels is cheaper than natural gas. Where do you think these misconceptions are coming from, where people don't think it's a smart idea or maybe economically feasible to create an energy?
Well, I think it's a couple of factors. One, you only have to go back 5 or so years, and people were talking about the efficiency of the panels and the materials and the cost, and it just wasn't cost effective. So we were subsidizing it. And so here's all this effort to subsidize and talk about cost. And I think people have in their heads then, this is too expensive. But the technology has changed rather dramatically. Quite frankly, you would hear a lot of people say, well, I live in Arizona, and there's a lot of sunshine, it works there. Pennsylvania, you got a few too many clouds. It's not going to work so well there. And here we have the largest solar farm in Pennsylvania, 150,000 panels under construction, and we're talking about it being less expensive for the university. Fantastic.
Do you think that other universities will follow in Penn State's footpath?
Well, I will tell you truthfully, anytime you have a cost savings, I think a lot of people will follow suit. That, you know, people are driven, and corporations and other entities are driven by cost. So that's a big milestone right there.
Do you think that because Penn State is a land-grant institution, do you think that that forced us to really make creating a more energy-suitable world a priority?
Well, I think part of our land-grant focus is of course in service to society. And I think the other part of it is we're a big comprehensive university. That means we can tackle problems that smaller places just can't do. We can have the intersection between all these different disciplines. We can actually consciously think about whether the Office of Physical Plant is a partner in the research and the activities and the path to sustainability. So I think it's more natural for a big comprehensive land grant to tackle this kind of problem.
And we've been able to tackle this because of the collaboration with researchers, faculty, and students. How has this collaboration really made a difference?
Well, so first of all, you have a lot of interest with students. So Sustainability Institute, a lot of passionate students that are involved in it. You got a university that believes it's part of their mission. And if you look across the whole university, you have faculty whose scholarship is involved in one aspect or another. We, as a university, we looked at research that was related to energy policy, that was related to fossil fuels, renewables, nuclear, efficient, effective use, and environmental impacts. And we're the only university in the country that ranks in the top 5 in all those categories in terms of research. So the people doing the types of things that make a difference are right here.
Do you think because other universities maybe don't have these resources that Penn State has, do you think that's why there's a lack of passion to actually implement change?
If you don't have resources, it's hard to innovate. It's just hard to innovate. If you can't cross all those boundaries, it's hard to work on the big research topics. But there are plenty of other universities that are quite capable. It just happens to be part of our mission, and I suspect it has something to do with our history. Coal, nuclear, now major center for natural gas production and a big factor in energy security, and now this focus on even being able to take these next steps. So this is really a very energy-oriented state. You often think of other states as being the energy states, mostly because of oil, but if you look at it, Pennsylvania is truly an energy state with an energy university.
Yes, we are. Yes, we definitely are. So thank you so much, President Barron.
Sure. Thank you.
Support for Digging Deeper comes from the Penn State Alumni Association, connecting alumni to the university and to each other. The Alumni Association is powered by pride. And from viewers like you. Thank you.